Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Grammy-nominated jazz violinist Curtis Stewart. We caught up with him on July 1st as the world of COVID slowed down to talk about his life and music and his brand new 2021 CD, Bright, Shiny Things. This is a post-classical coming-of-agency album inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement, featuring songs of resistance and resilience for violin, voice, and electronics. This cat has enjoyed an eclectic career bouncing between various realms of music, from MTV specials with Wyclef Jean and sold-out shows at the Madison Square Garden with Stevie Wonder, Bruce Springsteen, and Seal, to stints at the Kennedy Center with the Jimmy Heath Big Band, and also performance installment at places like the Whitney Museum. He's got a great story. Enjoy.
Well, hey, thanks for taking a minute out to the show today. I appreciate it.
Of course. I'm happy to be talking to you. Yep.
What I want to do is I want to start off with your brand new album and Bright Shiny Things, and I want to know, we've been going through this pandemic. It's coming out during a time where the world is kind of waking up that there's still a lot that needs to be done. What were your thoughts on this coming out now, being one of the very few ways you can communicate with your audience?
Well, actually, it's kind of funny. I'm in a similar position where I can't even really listen to it anymore. I want to put 2020 kind of behind me. Things are starting to change. And it was kind of created in the fever of all the, anxiety and anger and sadness that was happening during that year. And it's almost like a bit of musical therapy in a way, at least for me. It's an expression of this thing, a way to put it out. And I'm hoping that people who are still kind of working with their own fears and angers from the year are able to get a little bit of catharsis from the album. I think that's the idea. But they may need to take a second before they listen to it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the project at the moment.
What do you ultimately want the listener to get from this experience? I mean, is this your way of dealing with what we went through, or how do you want them to feel about this?
Yeah, I hope that they feel a little less alone. I think a lot of people were feeling, everybody has their own experience and story through this pandemic and through just feeling bottled up in our homes and dealing with the social unrest and some kind of hopeful bits of change. And I'm just trying to relate my own story as specifically as possible, because I think a lot of things get caught up in the media and things are generalized quite a bit. And, a lot of people don't really talk. What I've noticed is as I'm talking to people, especially but we're almost post-pandemic, we don't really like to talk about the details and to really feel that. And hopefully people can use this album as a way to move forward, in a way just to reflect on what happened and see themselves through the story that I'm telling, which is actually a much more abstract story. It's not like, I did this and then I did that. It's more a kind of confessional on some feelings and thoughts and doubts and, things that were happening while we were just cooped up in our homes. And the whole album was kind of recorded from my living room. So it certainly has that vibe.
Well, what did you learn about yourself during this pandemic quarantine time that you maybe didn't realize before that's going to make you stronger as you reemerge and get back on the stage and start doing some things that you used to do?
Well, I've learned, I'm kind of a devout chamber musician, and I've always played in bands, and I've learned that actually me doing something on my own is of worth. And I've learned that, I hadn't really put myself out there using my literal voice, my words and my vocal just instrument. And that was very, very scary. It really, basically, I just felt like it had to come out. And I released a couple videos on Facebook at some point in March or April, and then people suddenly started coming out of the woodwork just saying hey to me, people I hadn't spoken to in years, and they just were like, I love what you're doing, and I'm hearing it, and it feels exactly what I'm feeling, and I was just getting such a nice response from people in the moment, and everybody, it was just a thing for people to come and connect with me and connect with each other around. People would like to post in the comments, and we would start conversations together. So I realized that, trying to be honest and authentic and just being vulnerable in front of people is a tool in a way to connect people. As an instrumentalist, I've put in, I don't know how many hundreds, thousands of hours on this violin, and in a way, the instrument becomes a little bit of a shield. You're being as vulnerable as possible in that you're like expressing yourself and trying to be, putting your emotion into your playing and giving as much energy as possible. And you're always being judged as an instrumentalist and kind of compared to every person that has played the violin for you. So that's definitely vulnerable in a certain way, but literally expressing your thoughts and feelings and putting yourself out there in that way is a different level of lack of safety. And and hopefully I was hoping that people would, there's a different kind of humanity that people can connect to when you're using your voice. And especially it's certainly an untrained voice, when another person I was talking to almost felt like it's like a voice, like a spruced up voice memo. Because it's like the idea is, it's like, it's a confessional. It's a real confessional. That's the idea.
How did these seeds of music get sprinkled in you in the beginning? How did this kind of take hold and turn into a profession for you?
Well, both of my parents are musicians. My mom, Lectra Curtis Stewart, is a violinist, and she grew up in Poland, and she would actually hang out with the kind of Greek gypsies. She's Greek, but she grew up in Poland, and she would hang out with like the gypsies on the outskirts of town. And she learned all this. She was in the Warsaw Opera Orchestra. Her mom was an opera singer in the National Theater there. But then she would sneak away and play with the gypsies. And I remember she would always, and this was interesting, she would always tell me, because I was trying to learn improvisation, and I was going to classical conservatory, but she would always tell me, she's like, Curtis, don't let them know you improvise, because she had that built into her from a childhood that she can do this classical thing, but then she would have to kind of sneak away in order to really delve into this other music that she loved, because it wasn't allowed, and it would be judged. She would be judged for having that in her vocabulary. My dad is a jazz tuba player. His name is Bob Stewart, and he's played with all the greats like Sonny Rollins, Chick Corea, Dizzy Gillespie in their big bands and combos and things. I just always admired both of them when they were on stages, and I always just kind of wanted to do what they were doing. Eventually, they brought me into their own individual bands. I got a taste of that. And also, one interesting thing about them is, I've witnessed, people don't think of tuba. When they think tuba, they don't think jazz necessarily, but it was obviously one of the original instruments of jazz. But I've witnessed both my parents on tuba and violin kind of carving out their space in a music that doesn't necessarily offer a plethora of like opportunities. So that's something that I've kind of based my career on their model, just how to be authentic, but also how to create music where maybe there wasn't any before. Create opportunities for music making where there wasn't any before.
That is interesting, because you don't think about those instruments on a popular scale, especially with jazz being like in the forefront, so that, the two instruments that are probably not as common were a part of your lineage from the word go. That's very interesting.
For me, that is jazz. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The first thing I've heard was probably jazz tuba. So for me, it's like, it is jazz. And it is, totally. It's interesting to be coming from a place where the language, where, it's kind of like when somebody asks you, like, what's it like growing up in New York City? And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I don't have a reference point. I grew up here to be like, so it's similar.
I remember when my son was little, he went up to somebody that was blind at an event. I think he was either blind or he didn't have arms, and he went up and he said something pretty blunt because he was curious, and he said, I don't know any different. I just don't know any different. and that's the thing. It's like you adapt and learn, but you don't know any different. He never had arms or he never had sight. So
Right.
how is it that he would mourn something that he never lost? And that was kind of his gist. He even explained it that way, and it was really cool. And but what was the first live show that you saw that really blew you down and made you think, man, that's something I'd love to do?
Oh, wow. Well, I had been around it, and I always kind of, my mom wrote like a song for me when, and she would always say it from the stage, and I'd be like in the Cornelia Street Cafe, which is now closed in the West Village, and I would hide under the table because I was so being at my parents' shows I loved watching them, but there was a sense of kind of like they're there, and I'm kind of admiring them, and I'm kind of embarrassed when my existence is brought to the fore. The first show that I saw, and I was like so inspired for like weeks and weeks after, was actually this Maxim Vengerov at Carnegie Hall. He gave a solo recital in the huge theater at Carnegie Hall, and I just remember just feeling his energy kind of captivate everybody in the audience. So he actually did this encore. I can't remember the name, but it's about a bull that kind of dances around, and he was speaking while he was playing violin from the stage, and I just was like so charmed by that, and also just inspired by his playing. I think that was the first one that really brought me in addition to just seeing all the amazing. I also remember seeing Lester Bowie and Brass Fantasy. My dad played in that band, and it was a whole all brass group, and Lester Bowie was big in the kind of experimental jazz in Chicago, but he also had this band that did kind of covered some popular songs with an all brass group and with drums. And I just loved the energy, and it was just kind of like a sense of showtime, but it was also a very specific sound to have brass instruments cover, like Michael Jackson songs and Stevie Wonder songs and things like that. So, and then also having Lester Bowie doing his like really finely tuned squawks and squeaks and wild sounds in between. I think all of that kind of entered my world.
So was it always a destiny for you to be a musician? Is that always what you wanted to do?
I don't know. I was in high school, and I had one teacher that I was really good at math randomly, and I ended up getting a math degree from the University of Rochester, and alongside the violin degree from Eastman. And this one teacher really wanted me to become an engineer, and I thought about that for a second. I also have a teaching degree, so I taught at the LaGuardia Performing Arts High School. So I now teach at Juilliard, and I love teaching. I think somewhere between I could have been. And as a little kid, I remember my parents always had to leave the house. There was always all this tension about the alternate side parking rules in New York. So they always had to leave to move the car. And so in my head, I remember in my little sketch pad as a kid, I would draw and like design. I designed this this car that could like this street cleaning vehicle that could like clean the streets so people didn't have to move their cars anymore. I wanted to solve that problem. So I think I probably could have been some kind of engineer type of person. But I absolutely love teaching and music. I think it's just my language, and I just emotionally I just feel very connected to it.
Cool. What's the best thing about being a professional musician? What do you look forward to every day you wake up and you get the chance to create?
I mean, I absolutely love collaborating with people. My quartet, Public Quartet, we get together and we create music, and just that the process of putting together pieces, breaking things down, using this, not using that, putting it together, reworking it, creating transitions, figuring out varying influences to kind of mash together and figure out how they really work so that they feel like something, and so that they like honor the past as well as kind of think what is going to spark me right now. So I just love that combination of trying to figure things out. Recently, I mean, obviously in lockdown we've been very alone, so I've been doing a similar process with my digital audio workstation. So I'll my partner knows I'll be in front of the computer for hours and hours, tweaking and mixing and doing all that type of stuff and really just making it work. I just love making sounds that make me feel something. And I think that if I could do that all day, I would probably.
Right on.
Yeah. A lot of people. Yeah.
No, go ahead. No, you're good.
A lot of people love the act of performing, being on stage and just kind of being seen by people. Or I can't. But for me, it's the literal creation of the music that really sparks me.
So, with this time away from live music, what do you hope we all realize about the power of live music, both musician and the audience, when we do return in earnest?
Well, I mean, I've had a few live shows, and it's just the second anytime we say, like, yeah, we're all together again, everybody, like, cheers, And I think one of the huge things about music that we maybe took for granted is that it's like Thanksgiving, Everybody kind of like, I got to go do the traveling, I got to go do this, I'm going to have to see this relative, but really it's the gathering of those people. It's such a special thing to have events where the people you care about or people that you can have a meaningful interaction with gather. And I think live music is certainly a place where we all get to listen to that person, and we might hate the music that person is creating, and that's okay, but it's a moment for us to gather around it, and it's a moment for us to all kind of gain some kind of meaning together through sound, to feel something and be able to refer to this abstract feeling together. There's very few times, having an emotion is such a solitary event. And as you're watching music being made, and when you can feel when a whole audience is having a moment together, and that's so rare. I mean, not to mention just feeling this literal acoustic vibration in your body. It just feels different than listening to it on some headphones, or through your computer speaker. So a memory of the meaning of, gathering and feeling, just having emotional moments together. And I don't mean emotional like weeping or emotional like, I just mean having an emotion, a sensation of on the inside that's kind of ineffable, but having that together, I think that's, and as a musician on the stage, I hope it reminds us that, it's not all about us, actually, those concerts, that it is really about creating these moments. You're the kind of host. And so it's less about like being perfect and less about hitting that note and less about all that type of stuff. And it's more about just allowing that space to be created in the least proofy way. Yeah, totally. So everyone has a idea or perception of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life. Who do you think you are? Oh, well, I don't know. I'm just searching and trying to just keep creating things and trying to fight for the people around me that I want to support and staying loyal to those people, my quartet, my family, making sure I take care of them, and my partner, and trying to make things with those people. I think that's who I am really when it comes down to it. And I think the moments when I have to kind of sacrifice those close connections for the gig came along and I have to not do this thing that I planned with a person or a partner or my close person. Those are the hardest moments because they really challenge who I do see myself to be. And for example, I was teaching at LaGuardia for almost 9 years. I went to LaGuardia. My dad taught there in New York City. And, I was very tied to those students, very tied to those, that community. I felt like it was not family, but it was certainly somewhere getting there. And having to leave, I remember having to tell them that I was, headed to Juilliard to work in the admin and teach a bit. And I just remember the tears, all the tears and the screaming, like, no, you're not allowed to leave, and things like that. And, it was painful. It was like, finally, these high school kids were telling me what they really felt.
Yeah.
But, before that, I thought they hated me. But, it just reminds me of that, just reminds me of what's important. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great story. Hey, Curtis, thank you for opening up about the new album, the world we're in, your history. I really appreciate it. Good luck with everything.
Thank you. You too. Have a great day. Yep.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Curtis for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.